This video was recorded at the Spring Institute, March 2021. Our guest speaker in this video is Jerry White, Professor of Practice at University of Virginia.
And I thank you for inviting me to present. My name is Jerry White, and I'm a Professor of Practice at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville in the United States. Presently, I'm in St. Augustine, Florida, which is the oldest city in America, 1565. So that gives a little background. But today, my real purpose is to present what I've learned over the past couple decades about alignment and resilience and the importance they play in transformational leadership. Not just management, not just any leadership, but when you really want to be a game changer with systems that some have gone terribly wrong in our world today. So today I'm going to bring you through, first of all, alignment, what that means to me as a leader and my students and my colleagues. And then we will shift to a conversation about resilience. I apologize in advance. Very often I'll be referring to slides and may slow us down, but also I know some people may not be with screens or be visually impaired, and I want to be sensitive to that as well. So I will do my best to pace it and offer times of pause and reflection. So thank you again. One second here. At the University of Virginia, a little bit of technology here. At the University of Virginia, I teach a class on religion, violence, and strategy, how to stop killing in the name of God. And it's largely a class on strategy, but it looks at some of the most difficult cases of violence and genocide in the world, impossible, conflictual, and chaotic situations very often, and asks the question, what can we do to reduce or prevent or mitigate the disaster of this fast spreading violence? And the approach I take in teaching is the genesis of strategies. What are the 6 days of creation? What are the 6 days of forming a strategy? And today we won't have time to go through all of them, but I want to focus on alignment, the 3rd day of creation and genesis of strategy, and then also resilience, the 5th day. What do you do when you face all sorts of obstacles and you need to be adaptable and overcome real time while facing and struggling with difficult conflicts? One of the areas which I think I start on is this alignment of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And you may name this whatever you want. It may be awareness, advocacy, or action. So I've pulled up a slide showing what I would call an alignment compass. And it's showing, you have to know where you are, who you are, and whether you're aligned. So that is another way of saying, is your being, is your seeing, is your doing aligned for radical transformation and system change? But my vocabulary for this, for the purposes of my own thinking and presentation, is what does it mean to align wisdom, understanding, and knowledge? Who we are, how we see change, and what we do and know with excellence. So as an experiment here, I'll pull up a few slides of iconic people I think most of us would recognize anywhere in the world. So here's a picture of a nonviolence icon, Mahatma Gandhi. I'd ask you to take out a piece of paper at this time or for the course of the next few slides and just jot down what words come to mind when you see a picture of Gandhi. Just feel in the energy, feel in your body. If you were having lunch with him, what would you feel? What would you imagine? What do you think of him? Just jot down a couple words. It'll be different for everyone. Maybe humility, peace, nonviolence, whatever it might be. Don't overthink it, just what comes to you. All right, then. Here comes another political icon. This is a picture of Nelson Mandela after he's left prison. When you see and imagine or feel the presence of a Mandela, what comes to mind? What comes to heart? Write those phrases or words down on the piece of paper in front of you. And here we have a photograph of a survivor icon, Malala. Think of her situation. A young girl shot in the face. What does it take to overcome? What does it take to stand with courage? What does she evoke in you? Again, add those word diagrams or phrases on the paper in front of you, if you may. So this is the first exercise to sort of get at your wisdom, is what I call it, or some might say your value set or your self-awareness. We always hear that leaders and change makers have to know themselves, right? So let's look at this game of playing who's your favorite icon, or who's your most admired hero? Who do you really just look up to? And this could be a fictional superhero or a historical character. The only rule in this game is you can't name a family member. You can't put it on grandma, grandpa, or your mom and dad, or your great uncle or aunt. Who's your icon, your hero, who's not a family member? Take a moment and just come up with a couple or circle one. And now the slide asks you a prompt. What are his or her, their 3 finest qualities? As you think of having lunch with them, as you think of getting to meet them, or maybe you even know them and it might be a coach from your past, what are those core values, deepest energies, or essences? What are the 3 finest qualities that you can think of when you associate and feel and resonate with your hero? If possible, it's helpful to write them down as nouns as opposed to adjectives. So if you're thinking, persistent or diligent, I would say use the word diligence. But even more, I'd ask you to go beyond that word and say, what's behind persistence? What's a bigger word than diligence? What's in the energy of it all? So in your hero, you might be saying humble. So then I would ask you to just change that to humility and circle it on your page. And let's spend a little time with this, just without overthinking it, all the words that come to mind, energetic or essence words, deep qualities, the highest core, or let's put it this way, an indivisible word like joy, like peace, like humility, like goodness, these things that are not about, let's say, smart or hardworking. Those are behaviors. We're trying to get at qualities here, or deep values and virtues. So take some time and play with the words on your piece of paper for a while. You'll have time to revisit this also with other heroes. Maybe you have more than one. Or I find when I speak very often, whether in Japan or in Asia, this idea of a superhero or an icon, non-family member, is actually slightly harder. So I ask, your indulgence to play the game, understanding for some people, they aren't trained in that more individualistic or superhero mindset. So for better or for worse, it's just an exercise. But I understand that sometimes people will say, I have no heroes. I don't think that way, on one hand. Or on the other hand, I have so many I can't. So I just say, indulge me, indulge the exercise and play the game. Fantasize you can pick one. There's no right answer, of course. The next exercise, I would say, after you have your 3, is to actually start to think about beyond those 3 values you may have, Or maybe I'll go back and give my example for myself, just as I realized I hadn't done that. So if we go back to the idea of my heroes, I am one of these guys who has so many mentors and so many heroes and so many like historic like biographies I love to read. And even the ones we showed from Malala to Mandela to Gandhi, I love them all. But I think maybe to bring it down for me, I had to get beyond my spiritual superheroes like Buddha and Muhammad and Jesus and move towards people I had met and worked with, had the pleasure and privilege of working with, like the Princess of Wales, and also the late His Majesty King Hussein of Jordan. So I sort of melded two, and let's say I pick King Hussein or the Princess of Wales, and I do the exercise. I came up with lots of words, like a word puzzle or word soup. But over time, when I did this years ago, I landed on 3 words that really mean something to me. And that's the point of this exercise. I'm projecting, like you are, onto your hero, qualities that are actually yours or mine. So that's the game, is to get out of yourself and to feel the energies, because you will project 3 different qualities onto Mandela or Malala than I would. And that's because it's a reflection of yourself. And we're trying to get to that point to say, can you stand in your core values? Can you own your qualities and energies? So for me, when I think of working with the Princess of Wales, I shut my eyes and I feel light. I feel liberation. And I feel wholeness. And let's say I did that for Jesus, I might have like the same thing. And so when I did it I tricked myself by picking a few here, I felt that I was coming around to my 3 core, let's say, soul DNA paints to mix and match my metaphors. What energies I would stand in as Jerry White. So my name is Jerry White, and I stand for light, liberation, and wholeness for myself and for all others. And that's key, is actually in the exercise to be able to practice and declare, hopefully in the witness of others. Say your name. The name is not who you are. So I'm very particular. My name is Jerry. And I stand for, I inhabit light, liberation, and wholeness for myself and all humanity. This isn't just for like your cousin or someone in need. It applies to the sister or brother who bothers you, or applies to the strangers you don't know in refugee camps. Who are you? What do you stand for? If we do not know that, we cannot proceed as leaders in a transformational capacity. That is my conviction and my experience in trying to executive produce systemic change around the world. All big words, but really they boil down to simple essence and knowing thyself. So if you put that in an outer circle, for example, your wisdom circle, do 3 concentric circles, and you put your 3 words. So I would put light, liberation, wholeness. I'm going to be playing in that space of leadership. And then the middle circle, before we get to the inner circle, would be what you burn for. What's your mindset, your understanding? How do you see change? And so I asked the prompt on the screen for any of you with another sheet of paper to say, what makes you burn for humanity, for justice? And if you're like, I don't know what I burn for, and I've just been trying to find my passion all my life. Well, there are clues in what you read and what, pardon my French, like pisses you off or what irritates you as you project onto the world. You could do an exercise on who's your least hero, your unhero, who's your nemesis, who's your enemy. That's the shadow side here. What injustice, corruption, abuse really gets under your skin? I hope something. So no matter how equanimity you are, what you're pursuing in balance and not feeling pain, I believe transformational leadership requires us to break open our hearts to our essences of compassion and equity and dignity for all. So where's your burn? And later we'll learn how to use courage, leading with your heart and your essence, so you can feel empowered to take a stand, speak for truth. And also we want to principally, support risk takers out there who are disrupting the status quo and standing for what they burn for, justice or otherwise. So that's the middle ring. And the third part of the exercise is, hey, what are you good at? What are your skill sets? What's your knowledge and your know-how? So again, we were moving from wisdom in the outer ring, understanding in the middle ring, and now knowledge or know-how and action in the inner ring. This is very much in the West. What is your CV? Oh, you went to this business school, or you're a good orator, or you're great with Excel spreadsheets, or you know these softwares, or you speak 7 languages, or your Braille is amazing, and whatever your skill set is. Or I like to play in a modesty-free zone too. If you said, tell us something no one knows about you that's like pretty amazing. I don't know what you can do with your feet. I don't know if you're like an amazing dancer and no one even like knows that you like dressing up in a tutu. Like, just agnostic, judgment-free, modesty-free zone and say, I am super good at, write it down. It's like that area after your CV or your resume when you have like special interests or things. That's what I look at first. Who is this person in front of me? I assume that they actually have skills, and they all, some of them went here to college, or some didn't go to college, and some type and some don't. Like, those are slightly boring to me. It's more, where are you excelling? And what is your contribution as a skill for your team? And everyone is different. So for me, my secret skill is I'm an amazing, for a guy with one leg, I'm an amazing wedding dancer. Like at weddings, I'm like that father on the dance floor who's like spinning about and doing moves you've never seen and making my children rather embarrassed. It's a specialty. So there you have it. I'm a great wedding dancer. What are you good at? So that brings us to one of my mentors and friends who some of this material, she has coached me, and she was the first one who led me to this exercise, with a bunch of execs and a leadership program, people who are like 40 and above. And she said, if you don't know who you are, or you're embarrassed, or don't know how to declare the values you stand in, you have no, please leave. Like, you don't really have a business in this leadership course. So she has written a wonderful book on radical transformational leadership. And there are many things in there, including this lovely juxtaposition of old thinking, like fallacious and old thinking, and then new learnings. So one of the things for all of us, because I'm addressing you as leaders today, no matter what your age or your background or culture, to say committing to action, the fallacy says here on the screen with a lovely picture of Monica Sharma, the author, committing to action is not for everyone. Extraordinary people and certain personality types are more likely to do so. I'm just an ordinary person, and circumstances largely determine what happens. I don't know. She's crying bullshit. New learning. As human beings, we all have an innate ability to commit to action when we get out of our own way. Committing to action is what makes ordinary people do extraordinary things. And we may never know your name. That's part of my point here, is we are not looking for messiahs today. We are not waiting for another Mandela. We are inviting mini Delas. All of you, all of us, and together, collective and shared leadership of mini Delas contributing their skill sets and their awareness and their wisdom and gifts and core values to humanity. No excuses here. My vision has always been for a barrier-free world and a victim-free world. And that is my hope. So here we have another slide putting it in maybe a business school mindset. So when I speak at, I advise at Fordham University at the Gabelli School of Business or Darden at UVA, I might shift my language to value set, which is the outer ring. I use it in wisdom in my religion class, value set in a business class. And Monica Sharma would call it sourcing your inner power. Those are those three qualities or energies we mentioned earlier. That's the outer ring. And again, the middle ring could be advocacy, activism, or mindset. I find that mindset is an area like what's the shifting of policy, culture, or norms that are required for system change, for lasting, sustainable change. Not just like brushing and flossing for good dental hygiene or like taking out the trash and recycling. We're talking about a different brand of leadership that is transformational, and that's what I'm encouraging you to dream of and to inhabit and to practice, to do. Sourcing your inner power, number one, knowing and learning how to shift policy and systems and cultures and norms, and having the skills and practice to solve problems, technical solutions. Again, in the West and in business school, and in America in particular, that skill set, like solving problems, technical solutions, is where most groups go first. The person who raises their hand and says, well, let's get pragmatic here. What are we going to do? What are our next steps? And again, like your CV, it slightly bores me to move into action prematurely when you don't know or you have not diagnosed the underlying conditions of caste and racism and sexism and ableism and all of the isms, including the hatreds. And if you are misdiagnosing and you're moving to put Band-Aids and you're moving to put massage oil on like rough spots, you're missing the opportunity of shift. And shift can only happen if, in fact, you have properly understood the interdependence of our world and system mapping, as well as inhabiting the values and the courage of sourcing your power, the courage of standing in justice, the courage of not making it about yourself. And so that's Monica Sharma and my approach to transformational leadership. She calls it radical, which means getting at the root. It's not some 1960s thing. It's radical, root causes shifting. That is required, and it will only happen if you align your wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, your value set, mindset, and skill set. And if you don't, it shows up as shards and exhaustion and leaking energy and sort of cynicism and boredom. So when you have these symptoms of non-alignment, your leadership, let's say, is not at its fullest. We don't blame or judge anyone here because given the day, given COVID, given anything in our lives, given the barriers and challenges that we face, this isn't to be pie in the sky. It's just to say, it's okay. But knowing how to self-diagnose when you're off, when you've fallen from your inner powers, you can do that, and you can do it quickly once you learn to smell that you're off your game. You're not being your brightest, best, fullest, transformational self. And this isn't a self-help pitch. I'm not even trying to like motivate you. I'm just saying this is true in my experience and learning in life and who I teach at UVA. I say, how many of you want to change the world or make a difference? Almost all the hands go up in the class, 60 students every semester. And I say, great, let's learn how and let's practice. So I said, anyone can do it. Who's this boy? In the picture on the screen right now, I have an Israeli hospital, a young Israeli boy by the name of Daniel Yuval, 11 years old. And that's me on the left. He's invited me in with his family because this boy stepped on a landmine on a snowy day in northern Israel while he was going to his grandma's house for a Sabbath lunch. And the family had never made snowballs and had never made a snowman, and they just ran into this open field. 4 or 5 kids with the parents watching, delighted by the virgin white snow. And boom, there was an explosion. Little Danny steps on a landmine. Blood everywhere. His father runs in with courage, of course, to save his kids. And Danny has lost his lower right leg and is bleeding all over his father and the snow. And his sister has temporarily lost her vision, clinging to the father's leg. And the other boy is sobbing. And this Danny Yuval starts to tell his father and his brothers and sisters what to do. Move left, walk in those footsteps, stay on dad's feet. An 11-year-old with capacity inhabiting his inner powers. So again, from Monica Sharma, I have a quote here from her book on radical transformational leadership. Again, the fallacy, I quote, "Children and youth cannot engage in complex themes, such as discovering what they stand for or connecting their values to action they will take, especially children from families facing disadvantageous situations. Please, let's not condescend for poor little Jimmy or someone with disabilities. Poor them, poor us. Let's not project victimhood and inability onto anyone, anywhere, anytime, in any circumstance. Those are contexts. But we're talking about transformational inner power, and now 11-year-old boy. The new learning is children and youth from every culture across the world connect powerfully, maybe more powerfully than adults, to their inner capacities and their dreams, irrespective of where they are born or where they live. Maybe this is an addition to a victim-free and a barrier-free world. It sounds awful or a little tough love. What does an excuse-free world look like? So I'll give a little more of this example of what happened with this 11-year-old boy. So the next 3 slides are building out on value set, as well as mindset and skill set, and what happened as I, myself, years ago when I was 20, stepped on a landmine, not far from where little Danny stepped on a mine years later. And I was always ready for Israel to actually clean up in the Holy Land, to be mine-free, landmine-free. But at first, my approach was all wrong, ego-driven. I somehow made it about Jerry White, going back and vowing that the landmine field that I was injured in 1984 would be gone, and that I was pressing Israel to clean up minefields. But that was me as an angry activist, and had a cynical view of politicians, thinking like, okay, like how do we blame or shame or embarrass with media? That's adversarial. That's not an invitation for change. I have since learned over decades that guilt and shame, of course, are not great motivators. How do you invite the inner power or the goodness, the light, the liberation, and the healing out? So yes, I shifted after a number of false attempts, flailing and failing, to actually start to stand in solidarity with Israelis and Palestinians and people connected to the land. The land was the value. Everyone valued the land, whether hiking or nature or ecosystem. So if every inch is precious, why would we have military litter hanging out and threatening tourists like me or young boys like Danny Yuval? Where's the courage to clean up based on shared values and courage? All right, so that leads us to the mindset shift. In Israel, it turns out, here's another picture of a landmine on the right, but also the shift from a mindset that was like, we need landmines to protect ourselves, along with the barbed wire. And landmines are cheap and easy, and they keep terrorists away. They keep them out of our border, crossing our borders and trying to kill us. And then another old mindset or fallacy was everyone had just a different agenda. Even some of the landmine crowd was saying, we're the deminers, we clean up. So we were military and laid some landmines, and now you can pay us to take them out. Not thinking not about a system shift, but just a transactional contract. And the shift had to move from that type of thinking and mindset to one of shared human security. What does citizen and public safety look like? Solidarity, not being against the military and against everyone as a frustrated activist who's burning out, but an invitation with a common agenda to strengthen the economy, liberate the land, and increase prospects for cross-border, barrier-free development. Again, mindset shift and understanding of underlying causes, not just treating symptoms. And lastly, of course, there's what did we do in Israel with Danny Yuval? Well, we needed to find technical solutions. And in the beginning, no one even knew where the mines were. I found old maps from tourists and guides, started to put together on one map that had English, not just Arabic and Hebrew, so everyone could see what was happening in the Holy Land, and in this case, in Israel and the West Bank. And it turns out there was a lack of knowledge, so that was the shift on skill sets. Like, people just didn't know. They had seen signs warning about landmines in the north, perhaps, going through the Golan Heights, but there wasn't a coalition or an organized advocacy group or shared awareness, shared knowledge. So we had to move towards what's the common knowledge, translating the maps, creating a very simple communication device of what the situation was in Israel, where the mines were. And even from that, generals who did not know the full situation of landmines in their own country, although they were security experts, saw that you have no landmines to protect from your border with Egypt. See the map? You don't use landmines to wall off Gaza. Most of these landmine fields are non-operational, old, from 48, 67, 73, mixture of Russian and Syrian and Jordanian and Israeli and Lebanese, etc., Egyptian. So again, old military litter that do not buy you any security, and in fact are injuring your own farmers, hikers, kibbutzniks, families like the Yuval family, tourism. So I shifted to the happy ending. I think when you're a transformational leader, you're optimistic that something will come from all of this. And here's a picture of Danny Yuval, recovered from that hospital bed where I first met him after an operation and a surgery, where he had asked me, Jerry, what can we do to make sure this doesn't happen to any other child? You were an advocate, Jerry, for landmine ban around the world. How can you help me? And he stayed on message, looking up and to hear the Prime Minister Netanyahu's eyes, foreign ministers, every Knesset member, one by one. Simple. How can we make sure this doesn't happen to any of our kids, your kids? Powerful. So the fact that Danny Yuval tapped into his inner courage and power and leadership at age 11 meant that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu here puts him in the prime minister's seat with the Israeli flag behind him and says, do you know what seat you're in? That's the prime minister's seat, my seat. You are a leader. He practiced early, and crisis gave him an opportunity.
Thanks very much for watching. You can like and subscribe to our channel below. We're currently working on a British Academy funded project looking at the lived experience of disabled people during the pandemic. And you can find out what we're up to at tendproject.com or on Twitter at tendproject. Thank you.